Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Big Ten Media Days. It is winding down. In fact, on the podcast daily for a Friday, it's actually over. Never mind where we are right now. That's Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham, and I am Austin Ward. So we had some time to think about it. Ryan Day saying that there were conversations or that there should be more, and then I think acknowledging that there had already been some about moving the game up from the last spot of the regular season. We kind of wanted to wait and hear Jim Harbaugh's response to that, which we did on Thursday, and he answered in a very Jim Harbaugh fashion, Berm.
He said nothing, but said it weirdly, as opposed
That's the Jim Harbaugh way.
As opposed to just saying whenever it is, or I like it in November. It had to be weird. I don't, as the resident long-time Ohio State fan, I understand why people want this or think it has to be the last game of the season, but the world is changing, and I've seen a lot of bizarre responses to Ryan Day's statement on Wednesday. He was out there saying we can't play them at the last week of the season. Just said let's think about if there's another way. There was never a moment where it's we need to avoid Michigan or I want to not play them or whatever.
He did not say we would like to remove that as our flex plus protected opponent. Did not say that.
I mean, the first time they play back-to-back weeks, it'll be a fun little novelty and it'll be wow, this is crazy. But the second time it happens, everyone's just going to be super annoyed. Yeah. So why not just get proactive and say, hey, let's move this?
I think they're going to be super annoyed the first time it happens.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen probably next year.
Yeah.
I am torn on this because I don't really consider myself a traditionalist, I suppose, but I like that game being at the end of the year. But
it still will be in the Big Ten Championship.
It will be in the Big Ten Championship, right? They've moved it already. The schedules have changed. That game is no longer before Thanksgiving; it's after Thanksgiving. I guess in some ways that bucked tradition. This would be another way of doing it. I think it's one of these things where, Ryan Day, I think, is correct in at least broaching the topic. He didn't say we have to move it. He said we need to talk about it. But it's also one of those things where it's I don't know if you should say that out loud. You can think it, and I probably agree with you, and you should talk about it, but keep it in-house. Maybe read the room a little bit and understand what the reaction to something like that is going to be. But I actually think, in an odd way, he was kind of helped by Jim Harbaugh on Thursday, because Jim Harbaugh could have stood at that podium and pounded his fist and what are you talking about? We're playing this game the last week.
I was actually, when the question got asked, I was expecting Harbaugh to grandstand in that manner and be as someone who grew up in this rivalry, the other coach may not get it. I think I'm glad he answered it the way he did, but it's just I don't know.
I think the way that Jim Harbaugh answered the question validates what Ryan Day said before. And the reason that I think that Ryan Day talked about it publicly on Wednesday is because the conversations have already happened and they were surely addressing this. The Big Ten had to go through the whole process, preparing for USC and UCLA, eliminating divisions. Okay, what's the best way to do that? Crowning a champion. All right, we're going to do that. Flex plus pro, whatever you call that nonsense schedule.
That sounds like a gasoline you put in your car.
Yeah, it's very good for your car, but it's cost twice as much. And then they're thinking of the possibility, which is a very real one, because of what just happened in the Big Ten a year ago. Well, if this was our model, then the Ohio State-Michigan game last year would have meant absolutely nothing in the regular season. Both were already guaranteed to play in the championship game the following week. And I think that there is a real risk for the Big Ten. I hear the traditionalists, there's going to be people that say, I don't get it, I don't understand it, I didn't grow up with it, and that's fine. This is not what this is about. As much as you want to cling to tradition, you're not going to be able to, in the way, because of all the decisions that have been made across college football. You're not going to be able to protect that final week of the regular season. And I think that the way to ensure that there are high stakes for that matchup is to move it up in the schedule.
Yeah. And I mean, there's, obviously it's not apples to apples, but if we go back to last January, the Bengals and Ravens played in week 17 or week 18 of the regular season. The Ravens could have won the division had they beat the Bengals in week 18, but they knew either way they were playing them the first week of the playoffs. And so they sat everyone and didn't even try to win the division, and that game sucked. And then, that is what it is. That's the final game of the regular season between the Bengals and Ravens, two longtime rivals, and the game didn't matter to John Harbaugh in Baltimore because they were let's just try to win the one that actually matters in the playoffs. So, you will dilute things. That's going to happen anytime you make these teams play more than once. But as you said, and I said it in jest on Twitter on Wednesday night, why not just play that game, the first game of the season, as the Big Ten championship game?
Whoa,
but
whoa.
But what I mean is,
You didn't say it
no,
in
on
jest.
Twitter I did. I said because I called it the Big Ten title game.
Okay.
But that game, as opposed to being the last game of the year, let's just make it the first game of the year every single year. Start the season with Ohio State, Michigan. You get great weather. You get fully healthy rosters. You get 8 months of lead-in. You get all of the things you get from the late game of the season, all the angst and anxiety and hatred. But you still then allow the regular season to matter from there, because if Ohio State or Michigan loses in week 1, they can run off 11 straight wins, 12 straight wins, and still get into the...
And then play each other late in the season.
Right, which they're going to do anyway. So to me, it will feel foreign, but to me, that's not that way. You still have the circle date every year. It's the same.
Special.
It's a special date. Play it first.
I'm not. When you tweeted that yesterday, I was like, "That's dumb. I don't like that." But then we were talking about it more. I was like, "Yeah, I can see that. If you're going to move it at all, I would hate for it to just be like a random
week 7 this year,
October game, or like it's a game that like floats around the schedule and you don't know when it's going to land until the schedule comes out that year. Like that would be odd to me to like treat it. That is treating it as any other game. The only way I think to avoid that is to move it up and play it on the first game or first day, or maybe like it's always the Halloween weekend or something like that. I don't know, but there's a way to make it still feel special even if you do move it. I guess like maybe to play devil's advocate with it, it invites the conversation of like take Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, probably USC now when they join the league too. Maybe just those 4. Is it that all 4 of those teams should never play each other like past the first week of November? Because all 4 are going to be in contention to get into the Big Ten title game most years. And if that's the case, if you're talking about 4 teams that like can't play late, then like why move anything?
It's a fair point. I don't know the solution. I think that's one of the reasons why we didn't see any of this happen when the Big Ten put out the schedules for 2024 and 25. It's not supposed to be in the schedule maker's mind to put together power rankings and design it that way. It is not going to be a true NFL model of the second best team in the AFC West is going to play the second best team in the NFC East. They're not supposed to do that. And I think if they start meddling, that they do run into a risk that way. And maybe you can say that, to your point, if you start predicting that it's going to be Ohio State and Michigan forever, and it never actually becomes a concern that they were going to play back to back. I mean, it's going to happen. I think it's inevitable
because it's not a situation where the past doesn't matter. It's always been Ohio State, Michigan.
Sure,
it will always be Ohio State, Michigan, and yes, you will have Penn State and USC involved in that conversation. But Ohio State and Michigan are never going to be out of that conversation, barring some sort of catastrophic collapse of college football.
When do USC and UCLA play the same week every year too? Is the week before? It's not the last week of the season, right? Because that's usually Notre Dame. USC.
Yeah, I don't know if it's always the same.
Is it okay?
And,
sure.
And I was trying to think about this last night when Byrne brought up the idea. I don't know. It would be pretty extreme for the Big Ten to go all the way to week 1. They probably won't. For the traditionalists who say it's got to be the last game of the regular season because that's when you put your most important rivalries, that's really not always the case across college football. If you're going to lump the ones that you view as similar, which I think Ohio State, Michigan is the best rivalry, hands down.
I agree.
That's my stance on that, and that's where I'm coming from. But the ones that you're going to put in a similar conversation with Oklahoma, Texas, that's not ever been the last game of the regular season. It's generally around the 3rd week in October. That became a nickname for Alabama and Tennessee when I was covering that program down in the SEC. That it's the 3rd Saturday in October. Like that's the big one. They had. The SEC moved Florida, Tennessee up to September and made that one of the kickoffs to their season. I'm not putting either of those Tennessee games in the same category as Ohio State, Michigan, but there are other rivalries that are played at other times in the year. And when you're thinking about how things have to change across college football, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State aren't going to play anymore at all. And like these are the things that they're bitter pills that have to be swallowed because of what's happened to college football.
I think what makes Ohio State, Michigan so unique is that the game always has, not all, 99% of the time, has ramifications for everyone else in college football. Auburn and Alabama is a great rivalry, and you can play it the last week of the season every time, whatever. It's beautiful weather in Alabama. It's always nice. That game doesn't impact anything. Like once every 10 years, it matters in the big picture of college football. Ohio State, Michigan matters every single year. And so I think finding a date that you say, this is the one, and that's what, again, to me, season opener is the way to go if you're going to move it. And to your earlier point, like maybe Ryan Day shouldn't say it, but like as Austin said, someone's saying it. It's going to happen at some point. So why not start looking toward a way to make sure that the game still holds a significant meaning and still can influence everything? I mean, you lose that game at the start of the year, then you have to win out, generally speaking, if you're going to get even in a 12-team playoff.
Sure.
So I just think it's the only way to do it.
Or we could just never come here again to watch a Big Ten championship game.
Don't have one?
Don't have one in a world where there are no divisions. Award the title to the team that finishes with the best record, and then utilize some tiebreakers if you have to. Bump the schedule back a week, and then just play Ohio State, Michigan on the last Saturday of their season when everyone else is playing their conference championship game. Because it's going to be the Big Ten championship more often than not, probably not anyway, right?
Idea man over here. Tony Petiti.
Tony.
Come on down here, buddy. Yeah.
Tony.
Bill's got some ideas for you he wants to talk about.
I just snorted. I don't know why that happened.
Welcome to Indy.
Is it because of the way I said Tony Petiti?
Yeah, Tony Petiti.
I mean, look, I'm sorry for everyone that wants it to always be the last week of the regular season. The other part of this, as Bill alluded to early on, is that I feel like Berm's probably not going to like this, but all of us have been covering this rivalry, or you've been living it your whole life. When it moved after Thanksgiving, the interest in the game, not people's passion for Saturday, not on noon at kickoff, not any of that. From Sunday through Friday, we see the analytics, we know who's reading and who's watching the stories. The hype for that game doesn't exist in the same way, and I'm not blaming anybody for the way that has happened, because it's an important time to celebrate with your family and spend Thanksgiving, and then people go shopping on Black Friday. The game doesn't, for most people, not everyone, they don't engage with it the way they do other regular season games. The hype that's around Ohio State, Penn State, and the fever pitch and the numbers that we see, the engagement on stories and videos is different because that's into the flow of the season. And once that got moved after Thanksgiving, which already was a big deal and an adjustment for Ohio State and Michigan fans, I think it damaged the product, and that was a minor step compared to what maybe we're talking about here.
I don't hate that. It's true. I mean, even people in my own family circle, like, it doesn't have the same weight as it did 8 years ago, where it was, you knew, like, that game ends and then Thanksgiving is your way to, like, mourn with your family or celebrate with your family, you know? So this current setup doesn't feel like it's as relevant as it was. That's a perfect point. So you have to understand, or you don't, I guess, but it's happening regardless of whether or not you want it to.
You have to understand it, but you don't have to accept
it. Yeah, it's changing, and college football is changing. And so, to me, keep the magnitude of the game by putting it in week one.
So you made the reference to the NFL last year with the Bengals and Ravens. Moving the game back up to a traditional slot before Thanksgiving, does that do anything for you? Or is that not enough of a buffer between championship?
I think the whole point is that if you lose that game in November, your season feels over.
Yeah.
Ryan Day and the Buckeyes are a perfect example of that a year ago. They were very realistically going to make the playoff, even after losing to Michigan. And we all talked to people around the Ohio State program like, who cares?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. We lost to Michigan. If you lose to Michigan in week one, or you lose to Ohio State in week one, you have a whole season to get right and to get yourself corrected. So to me, if you're going to move it, I think you move it significantly. Moving it up to week 10 or week 11 doesn't change the fact that there's a recency bias in the way people view college football games, and no one wants the loser of that game in the playoff.
What if they took it and moved it to week one and then played it at a neutral site?
I would love that.
Just kidding.
Oh, now you are advocating. They're going to play it in here.
Play it in Detroit, play it in Cleveland.
That would be the worst thing they could ever.
I mean, do it once. I just think that it's a game that obviously deserves its own space and its own moment. But we can't deny the fact that the sport is changing, and now you have to adjust.
Yeah, I think the last thing that I would say about it is, you guys both said, at some point this will be a reality, that there would be a rematch, whether that's back-to-back weeks, whether they move it, preemptively. It's the last game of the regular season in 2024. That's not going to happen. So there could very well be consecutive weeks in a rematch. If and when that happens, the people that are clinging to the tradition and that spot on the calendar will not like it if they're both clinched and they're both coming to Indy already, because they will not try to win the regular season game. Neither team. that game would have less importance and less stakes than any other iteration that has ever happened. And that would be the time then you would, if you're not willing to accept that this is something that could or should happen for the game, then that would be the final straw. If you're hoping and you're watching and you want them to win gold pants in the last week of the regular season and nobody's trying, then that would be, you'll hate that, I promise you.
Yeah, no, why do you think that would be true and not the opposite? Just like treat this game like it means nothing. The trophy?
I think generally because this is more impactful as far as a bid into the playoff.
But in the 12-team world, is that true?
I mean, I assume that the conference
for
champions
If you
will
want the
have-
automatic berth and then the seeding, the possibility, I think that would, the last one would be more important. I think whether you or me or anybody else would say, well, I mean, the regular season one, that was the one you needed to win. It got you in. It's gold pants. That's your tradition. Anyone can have a different opinion on which one should matter more, but I think in the eyes of the 12 jurors and the college football playoff selection committee, they're supposed to look at, did you win your conference championship?
Right.
And so I would think it would carry more weight.
Again, the Ravens could have won the division and sat their entire starting lineup against the Bengals in week 18, just to make sure that in the next week they were more fresh and that the Bengals wouldn't have an idea of what they were going to do, and played a dummy football game that meant nothing. And I think that you have to go to whatever length you can to make sure that's not how the Ohio State-Michigan game feels, not just in 2024, but ever.
Well, especially if you're the road team, Bill, it's like, well, we're not going to put anything into that game. Like, you're allowed to lose on the road. It's hard. Let's tap out on that one, and we'll get them in Indy. We'll be fresh at a neutral site, and that'll carry more weight. Like, maybe I'm wrong, but
no, I didn't mean to say that you were wrong. It just got me thinking. Like, I wonder how they would actually approach it. But I also guess it would depend on how you think the playoff selection committee would view it. That's the more important thing, I guess.
Sure.
And they probably would value winning here for whatever reason more than they would winning in a regular season.
Because bottom line, once you expand the playoff to 12 teams, there isn't a world that exists where an 11-1 Ohio State or 11-1 Michigan aren't in the playoff every single year. Mm-hmm. So, like, we know that's coming. So how do you find a way to keep the importance of that game while understanding this other point? That even if you lose in week 1, as long as you win everything else, it's probably not going to matter. But at least you put something on that game where it's, carrying a weight.
And I think in Jim Harbaugh's unique, weird way, and I'm no expert at parsing his press conferences, but he said, we will play that game at any point on the schedule. It was not what you said, pounding. It has to be the final week. He said that's where it is now. That's what people are used to. But there was enough hints in his answer combined with what Ryan Day said on Wednesday to think that Ohio State athletic department, Michigan athletic department, they probably expect that the game will move and at some point in the next few years.
Yeah, and I think the Big Ten and Ohio State and Michigan are probably going to be helped if and when it happens next year and everyone's like, this stinks. Like, I think it'll be an easier thing for people to come around on.
Labor Day weekend, Sunday night, Ohio State, Michigan.
Sunday night
every year.
I like that, like independent of anything else.
Labor Day weekend, Ohio State, Michigan, Sunday night. Go for it. The NFL doesn't start till a week
We
later.
don't want them in that Monday night spot?
No, Monday
Give
night.
them the full
I want
stage?
But what
Sunday.
about Virginia Tech versus Wake Forest?
Believe it or not, I don't care about that. I think that if you put it on Sunday night, don't put it on Monday night. There's too many people have to go to work on Tuesday.
Yeah.
People don't work on Monday.
Wait, Berm is
it's a holiday.
Berm is skipping ahead a little bit. Not only does he not want the game at noon, he wants Sunday night prime time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, make it matter.
I'm glad he's
Put
here.
it on a pedestal.
I'm not afraid to change it up. Make it matter. Sunday night,
Putting the game on a pedestal.
Labor Day,
You're doing this all wrong.
Labor Day
You're
weekend,
putting it on a pedestal.
Labor Day weekend. I know the reference. Labor Day weekend, Sunday night, Ohio State, Michigan, every year.
I'm really glad that he feels this way because normally I'm the one that's like, oh, he doesn't get it. He doesn't care about tradition.
I think
I love tradition, but you can make new ones.
I do not love the idea of moving the game, but I kind of like that idea.
Tony.
Patini.
I don't know where he went. We'll track him down. We'll get Bill and Berm on it. We'll get all of this sorted out for you all so that you can, find a new tradition, a new way to enjoy the game. As long as those two teams play and there's stakes, that's all I care about. They can
Steak.
delicious meat discs. Hope you had a great week. We've enjoyed being back and talking ball here in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. A lot of content. We hope you've enjoyed that. We're going to maybe take a couple days off on the weekend, and then we'll be back with a lot more, getting ready for the start of training camp for Ohio State. First practice on Thursday. So we are juiced for that. He's Bill. That's Berm. I'm Austin. We'll talk to you later.